Before we drift into tonight's tale of the entire story of Flame Princess, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up. Let's begin. Our story tonight begins not in a peaceful meadow, nor under the gentle glow of a starry sky, but deep in the heart of a kingdom made of fire. Imagine an endless sea of magma, rivers of glowing lava winding like veins beneath the land, feeding towering volcanoes that rise and fall in constant eruption. The Flame Kingdom is alive with heat and smoke, a land of perpetual dusk lit by embers and sparks. Even the air itself is heavy, shimmering with the waves of heat, making every breath feel thick and consuming. For most, this world would be unbearable, but for those born of fire, it is home. At the center of this blazing kingdom sat the Fire King, an ancient and imposing figure with flames for hair and a crown of burning embers. His rule was not one of kindness or gentle leadership. Instead, it was a reign built on fear, dominance, and a deep desire to maintain control. The Fire King embodied the destructive side of fire, unpredictable, scorching, and merciless. His subjects obeyed him, not out of love, but out of necessity, for even a flicker of rebellion could lead to total incineration. And yet, even in a place so harsh, life found a way to flicker into something delicate. In the Fire King's court, a new flame was born, his daughter, who would come to be known as Flame Princess. From the moment of her birth, her presence unsettled her father. The flames that danced around her crib burned brighter, hotter, and more fiercely than those of ordinary fire elementals. It was as if the very essence of wild, untamed fire had been condensed into her small form. The Fire King, who had spent centuries bending his kingdom to his will, looked upon his child not with tenderness but with fear. He had seen what raw fire could do, how easily it could consume forests, kingdoms, and lives. And so when he gazed at his daughter, he saw not just a child but a threat, a prophecy of destruction waiting to ignite. To those outside the kingdom, the Fire King's choice may seem cruel beyond measure. But in the logic of fire, where survival depends on control, he believed he had no other choice. And so he built for her a prison of rock and flame, sealing her away in a chamber deep within the kingdom. Her cradle became a cage, her childhood consumed by walls of stone and iron. She was allowed no gentle guidance, no soft voice to reassure her. Only the crackle of fire and the rumble of distant eruptions kept her company. In that isolation, Flame Princess grew a girl who was both heir to a throne and a prisoner of her own father's fear. Imagine her as a child, pacing the limited space of her chamber, eyes glowing like molten amber, listening to the muffled sounds of her father's kingdom beyond her prison wall. She may have pressed her hand to the rock, feeling the vibrations of the fire elementals outside, wondering why she could not join them. And yet, despite the loneliness, the fire inside her never dimmed. In fact, it only grew stronger, pulsing with each passing year, an ember that refused to fade. She was born not simply of fire, but of the pure essence of destruction and change. Her very existence embodied both danger and potential, the possibility of ruin, but also the spark of renewal. The Fire King's fear of his daughter's strength can be seen as a reflection of how fire has always been perceived. To some, fire is warmth, a hearth in the night, the heart of community and survival. To others, it is a destructive force, one that takes without mercy, reducing homes and forests to ash. Flame Princess carried both of these truths within her, and her father, unable to reconcile them, chose to smother her potential confinement. But even walls of rock cannot extinguish a flame and to burn. As she grew, her emotions began to mirror the nature of fire itself. When she laughed, the room glowed brighter, flickers of golden light dancing the stone walls. When she grew angry, her flames raged, scorching everything at sight, making even the strongest guards wary of approaching her chamber. These outbursts only confirmed the Fire King's fears that she was too dangerous to be free, too volatile to ever sit upon his throne. What he could not understand was that his daughter was not a weapon. nor a threat to be hidden away. She was simply a flame learning how to flicker, how to stretch, and grow in a world that had denied her the chance to breathe. The kingdom outside her chamber burned on, unaware of the girl locked away within its core, a princess born of fire, destined to change not just the fate of her people, but the story of itself, the Fire King. For all his strength and pride, could never escape the gnawing thought that his own daughter might one day overthrow him. Legends within the Flame Kingdom spoke of fire's nature, that every blaze eventually consumes its source. He feared that one day, the crown would no longer rest on his head, but would pass to the child he tried so desperately to control. And so his paranoia deepened. To keep his people loyal, the Fire King painted Flame Princess as unstable, dangerous, and unfit to rule. He spoke of her temper, her unpredictability, the chaos that followed her presence. His words spread like sparks on dry tinder, and soon the kingdom believed them. Few dared to speak of her, and fewer still wished to see her freed. For them, the Fire King's dominance meant stability, and the idea of a princess of untamed fire brought only unease. And yet, in quiet moments when the king walked the halls of his volcanic palace, he must have heard the faint echoes of her voice, a child's cries muffled by stone, a laugh that flickered before it was snuffed out by silence. Perhaps, even if only for a fleeting moment, he felt the weight of what he had done, but his fear was stronger than his guilt, and so he convinced himself that it was necessary. Better a daughter in chains than a kingdom in flame. The tragedy of Flame Princess's childhood lies in this balance between love denied and fear inflamed. Children are meant to grow by touching the world around them, by learning how far they can reach and how gently they can hold. For Flame Princess, every attempt to reach outward was met with confinement, and so her emotions, unable to find balance, surged within her unchecked. Her flame was not taught to dance softly or to warm those she cared for. Instead, it lashed out in bursts of anger, scorching the very walls of her prison. When she was calm, her fire burned softly, glowing like the embers of a campfire. But when her heart stirred with strong feeling, her power threatened to consume her chamber entirely. This instability was not a sign of malice, but of neglect. Fire left untended will always burn wildly. Had she been given love and understanding, her flame might have settled into balance sooner. But her father's fear ensured that she was left alone to wrestle with her own nature. In the lore of Adventure Time, the Flame Kingdom represents more than just a fiery nation. It mirrors the themes of inheritance, cycles of destruction, and the heavy weight of fear passed from parent to child. The Fire King, consumed by his own paranoia, could not see beyond the image of himself reflected in his daughter. He believed she would inherit only his flaws, the hunger for power, the destructive instincts, the ruthless desire to dominate. What he overlooked was her potential to choose differently, to forge a new path. There is a quiet poetry in imagining young Flame Prince staring at the cracks in her chamber wall, where slivers of molten light peeked through like stars in a burning sky. Perhaps she dreamed of the world beyond, a place she had never touched, but longed. In her dream, she might have imagined forests, rivers, or skies, things she had never experienced, only whispered to her by the guards who kept watch outside her cell. For a child who knew only fire, even the thought of cool rain or a gentle breeze must have felt like something magical, something unreachable. And so, even before she stepped foot into her story was already one of yearning. Yearning for freedom, for choice, for the chance to discover what she truly was beyond her father's fearful vision. That yearning burned as fiercely as her flame, shaping her heart long before she met Finn, long before she ruled her people, long before she began to see herself as more than destruction. The Flame King's decision to imprison her can also be seen as an allegory, a reflection of how societies often treat power they do not understand. When faced with something unpredictable, people often choose to cage it rather than nurture it. The same fire that can destroy a home can also keep it warm through the coldest night. Flame Princess carried within her the essence of both destruction and survival, but because her father feared the first, he denied her the second. In many ways, her childhood echoes the myth of fire itself. In ancient stories, fire was often stolen from the gods, hidden away, or bound by rules so it could not burn unchecked. Only when given to humans did it become a tool of creation. Flame Princess, too, was hidden away like forbidden fire, kept from the world for fear of what she might unleash. But her destiny was never to remain hidden. Sooner or later, every flame finds a way to spread its light. The Fire Kingdom, beyond her chamber, thrived in a strange, blazing way. Lava rivers carved paths through obsidian streets. Fire wolves roamed under ash clouds. Elementals of heat and ember built their homes from volcanic stone, their lives bound to the rhythm of eruption. They lived under the watchful eye of their king, believing his rule unshakable. But deep beneath their feet, the true heir to their throne waited a spark in the shadows, growing stronger with each passing year. And so, as time drifted on and Flame Princess matured, her father's fear grew heavier. He could not keep her hidden forever. Already whispers passed among the guards who saw her fiery bursts. Already her presence pressed against the walls meant to contain her. The Fire King may have believed he had control, but no cage can truly hold fire. One day her flame would escape, and the world of Ooh would never be the same. The Fire King's fear of his daughter's destiny was not entirely unfounded, for in the strange logic of the elements that shaped Ooh, every being carried within them not just power but purpose. The Ice King embodied loneliness and obsession. Princess Bubblegum represented creation and order. And in Flame Princess, the essence of fire was not merely heat and destruction, it was transformation. It was the truth that nothing can remain as it is forever. Fire insists on change. It devours the old so that something new may rise from the ashes. Yet to a ruler obsessed with control, transformation felt like a threat. The Fire King saw no beauty in change. He saw only the loss of his throne, the collapse of his power, and perhaps the reflection of his own failure. And so, instead of guiding his daughter, instead of teaching her to balance the blaze within her, he buried her away, treating her not as a child, but as a weapon waiting to ignite. Still, fire has a way of teaching itself. When left alone, a flame dances, bends, and grows in ways no one can predict. As the years passed, Flame Princess began to understand her emotions through the way her fire responded. A flicker of joy would send warm golden sparks into the air. A surge of sadness would dim her flames to a low, heavy glow, smoldering in silence. And when anger struck, when the frustration of her imprisonment overwhelmed her, her fire erupted in violent bursts, filling her chamber with searing heat that made even the strongest guards hesitate to approach. It was in these bursts that the true danger of her confinement revealed itself. The Fire King believed he was containing a threat, but in truth he was feeding it. Every year she remained locked away. Her fire grew hungrier, her emotions sharper, her longing deeper. She had no outlet, no guidance, no gentle hand to show her that fire can warm just as easily as it destroys. And so, without knowing it, the Fire King was ensuring that his fears would come true. The Flame Kingdom, meanwhile, carried on in its harsh rhythm. Imagine the endless glow of lava rivers running beneath bridges of blackened stone. Imagine fire citizens going about their lives, carrying torches not for light, but for pride. Their laughter was sharp, their games rough, their feasts lit by sparks that leapt into the sky like fireworks. It was a culture built upon resilience, for in a land where everything burned, one had to become strong enough to withstand the heat. And yet, in the corners of that fiery realm, stories persisted, whispers of the king's hidden heir, a girl of unparalleled flame, locked away somewhere deep in the kingdom. Few dared to speak of it openly, but legends have a way of slipping through cracks like smoke. The thought of her lingered in the minds of the people, an ember of possibility that one day a new ruler might emerge. For Flame Princess herself, those whispers were distant. Her world was no larger than the chamber her father had sealed her in. But even there, life found small ways to creep in. She may have listened to the faint rumble of lava rivers outside, their steady flow like the heartbeat of her kingdom. She may have noticed how her flames reflected against the stones, painting shifting patterns on the walls, like stories told in light and shadow. Even without knowing it, she was already part of something larger, her destiny stretching beyond the bars that confined her. The themes of her childhood echo through the whole of Adventure Time's lore. Flame Princess was not simply a prisoner of her father, she was a prisoner of fear itself. Fear of what she might become. Fear of how much power she carried. Fear that she would be too much to control. And in that way, her story resonates with the quiet truth many carry. That sometimes, the parts of us most feared by others are the very parts that make us whole. If we pause and reflect, there is something profoundly symbolic in the image of a child born of fire, locked away for the very gift that defines her. Fire has always been seen as dangerous, yet humanity cannot live without it. It is the same with passion, with anger, with the fierce emotions that make us human. When suppressed, they build until they erupt, often in destructive ways. But when nurtured, when given balance, they become a source of creativity, warmth, and strength. Flame Princess's story is, in many ways, a tale of learning how to turn fire from chaos into purpose. The Fire King, however, was blind to this possibility. To him, power was something to dominate, not something to guide. He ruled by fear, and so he parented by fear. He saw only the shadow of destruction in his daughter's eyes, never the possibility of light. And so the years of her childhood slipped away in darkness, her fire growing brighter, her spirit growing restless. As she came of age, the walls of her chamber could no longer contain her energy. Her outbursts grew larger, her flames hotter, until the very foundations of her prison trembled with each surge of emotion. The Fire King, watching this unfold, realized that his daughter's power could not be hidden forever. He had kept her sealed away for so long, but Ooh has a way of uncovering secrets. Just as lava will always find a crack to flow through, so too would Flame Princess find her way into the wider world. And when she did, the Kingdom of Fire and all of Ooh would be forced to reckon with the blaze she carried within her. The tension within the Fire King's heart only grew heavier as his daughter's power ripened. He had hoped that time would dim her, that by confining her and starving her of freedom, she would weaken into obedience. But fire does not shrink in stillness. It waits, it smolders, and when the air is finally let in, it roars higher than ever before. There must have been moments, late in the night, when the Fire King stared into the molten river's realm and wondered if he had made a mistake. Perhaps he remembered the first time he had looked into her infant eyes, bright as glowing coal, and felt something stir he refused to name. But even if such doubts touched him, they quickly hardened into the same paranoia that had guided him since her birth. The king's crown weighed heavier than any tenderness he might have felt. And so instead of reaching out, he pulled further away, sinking deeper into his fortress of suspicion. Meanwhile, within her chamber, Flame Princess's inner world was shaping itself. Though her life was defined by confinement, her imagination burned brightly. In the stillness of her cell, she might have dreamed of what lay beyond the stone walls, skies unbroken by ash, winds that did not sting with heat, and waters that moved freely, cooling everything they touched. To someone born of fire, such visions would have been fantastical, even impossible, and yet, deep in her heart, she must have longed. As her teenage years approached, her fire began to take on a new quality. No longer the erratic bursts of a child's tantrum, her flames carried intention. They sharpened with her willpower, flaring in response to the clarity of her emotion. Anger would still ignite violent eruptions, but determination gave her fire a steadier strength. Her growth made it clear that she was no longer a hidden spark. She was becoming a blaze too bright to be ignored. It was around this time that the threads of destiny began weaving her story closer to the surface. The Fire King, realizing the difficulty of containing her forever, considered her not only as a danger, but also as a potential bargaining chip. In his mind, Flame Princess was a piece on a chessboard, someone whose presence could be used to intimidate or manipulate the outside world. What he failed to understand, however, was that once she stepped into that world, she would no longer be his pawn. She would be free to kindle her own path. The Flame Kingdom itself seemed to reflect this growing restlessness. Eruptions became more frequent, as though the land itself echoed the stirring of its hidden air. The citizens of Fire, though they did not yet know her face, began to feel the weight of a change simmering beneath their feet. A new flame was rising, one that would either scorch their world to ash or light it in a new way they had never imagined. And here lies one of the most haunting aspects of her story. Flame Princess did not begin her life as a villain or a hero. She began as a child, denied the chance to learn who she was. She was told she was dangerous before she could discover her gentleness. She was imprisoned for destruction she had not yet caused. And in this way, she represents the universal struggle of being misunderstood, of being judged not for what one has done, but for what others fear one might become. The image of her growing within that chamber feels almost like a fairy tale, the hidden princess locked away, not for her protection, but for the fear she inspired. Unlike the soft tales of slumbering princesses awaiting rescue, her story carried heat and fury. There was no slumber for her, only fire crackling against stone, waiting for the day her walls would fall. And so the stage was set. A kingdom of fire ruled by a paranoid king, a people who had grown accustomed to his dominance, but who whispered in secret about the heir who might one day rise. And beneath it all, a young girl burning brighter with every heartbeat, her destiny pressing outward, reaching beyond the cage her father had built. It would not be long before the outside world intruded upon this balance. Beyond the borders of the Flame King, a boy named Finn was growing restless in his own way, seeking adventure and connection. And in time, their paths would cross, his courage meeting her fire, sparking a relationship that would forever alter both of their lives. But before that meeting, before Finn's curiosity unlatched the cage, we must pause and hold on to the image of who she was in those early days. A flame in the dark, feared by her own blood, yet yearning for a world she had never seen. She was a daughter of fire, born in a kingdom that both needed her and rejected her. She was the embodiment of change itself, hidden away by a ruler desperate to stop the inevitable. Her story began not with freedom, but with change, and perhaps that is why, when her flame finally touched the air of Ooh, it burned so brightly. For a fire suppressed too long does not emerge quietly. It blazes unstoppable, carrying within it the memory of every moment it was denied. And that is how the tale of Flame Princess begins, with fear, with isolation, but also with possibility. For within the girl hidden in the chamber of stone lay not just the spark of destruction, but the potential for warmth, renewal, and transformation. The Fire King could cage her body, but he could never extinguish the destiny written to her flame. Soon she would step into the wider world, and the story of Ooh would be forever changed by the light she carried. Let's drift deeper into Flame Princess's journey. We followed her origins in the heart of the Flame Kingdom, a child born of fire and bound by the heavy hand of her father, Flame King. Now we move forward into the moment where her world begins to expand, the moment the cage opens and she steps into the wider land of Ooh. Her first taste of freedom was not a gentle one. Flame King, who had kept her locked away for most of her life, finally allowed her release, but not out of kindness. It was strategy, suspicion, and control disguised as mercy. He feared that her fiery essence might bring destruction, but also recognized that she couldn't stay caged forever. So when her confinement ended, it was under a cloud of unease, as though the very air carried warnings of what her flame could ignite. Imagine her first steps outside the walls of that cage. The air would feel different, no longer choked with the constant smoke of the Flame King. The breeze of Ooh carried scents unfamiliar to her, perhaps the sweetness of grass or the faint perfume of flower. To someone who had only known the oppressive heat of her father's realm, the world outside must have seemed like another dimension entirely. Yet freedom came with uncertainty. Flame Princess wasn't just stepping into Ooh as an innocent child of fire. She was burdened with her father's warnings, his mistrust, and the knowledge that she was something volatile. Those words, spoken so often, echoed in her mind. She was dangerous, she was destructive, she was meant to be feared. What does that do to someone still trying to understand who they are? It's here that Flame Princess first crossed paths with Finn. Their meeting was a turning point in both of their lives, though it didn't begin with fairy tale softness. Finn's fascination with her wasn't just curiosity, it was recognition. He saw her not as a threat, but as someone remarkable, someone unlike anyone else. And for Flame Princess, who had been told her whole life that she was too dangerous to exist freely, this recognition was life-changing. Their connection was instantaneous but complicated. Fire and flesh don't mix easily, and that truth haunted their early encounters. Whenever Finn tried to reach out, the searing heat of her body reminded them both that closeness came with pain. To love her meant risking burns, and to be loved by him meant risking heartbreak if she lost control. But even in those moments, there was something tender, an unspoken understanding that they wanted to figure it out, no matter the odds. As Flame Princess began to explore more of Ooh, she discovered both beauty and strangeness. Think of it through her eyes. The rolling green hills of the Candy Kingdom, the glittering towers of Princess Bubblegum's realm, the endless forests alive with magic and danger. Every step brought her new sensations, new possibilities, and also new fears. She wasn't just a girl walking into Ooh, she was fire itself, trying to fit into a land where she could so easily consume what she touched. Her early days in Ooh were marked by moments of wonder and tension. For instance, her first interactions with the Candy Kingdom weren't entirely smooth. Princess Bubblegum, brilliant and cautious, couldn't help but see Flame Princess as a potential risk. To someone like PB, who valued order and control, a being made entirely of fire, driven by raw emotion, was like holding a ticking bomb. This skepticism shadowed Flame Princess' first steps into diplomacy, reminding her that even in freedom, suspicion followed close behind. But despite the suspicion, there was also acceptance, sometimes from unexpected places. Creatures of Ooh who had lived with strangeness all their lives didn't see her as a monster. They saw her as another unusual figure in a land filled with. To a magical world already shaped by liches, candy people, and cosmic entities, a girl of fire was simply another story walking among them. Yet for a Flame Princess, acceptance wasn't so simple. She carried with her the lessons of her cage, the belief that she was destructive at her core. And when anger stirred within her, when her flames flared and scorched the ground beneath her feet, those fears seemed to come true. Each spark of fire made her wonder, was her father right all along? Was she destined to be nothing but chaos? This tension made her bond with Finn all the more meaningful. He didn't shy away from her power, even when it singed him. Instead, he saw her as someone who could learn, someone who could grow beyond the image her father had painted up. For Flame Princess, that faith was like oxygen, fueling her hope that she could be more than destruction. So her first steps into Ooh weren't just physical. They were emotional, spiritual, and deeply symbolic. They marked the beginning of her transformation from a prisoner of fire into a person trying to define herself in a world that didn't know what to make of her. The cage had opened, but what waited for her outside was not a clear path. It was a maze of relationships, doubts, and revelation, each one testing the balance between who she feared she was and who she longed to be. And in those early encounters with Finn, with the kingdoms, with the vastness of Ooh, Flame Princess began to write her story not as her father's daughter, but as her own. As Flame Princess wandered further into Ooh, every encounter became a lesson in contrast. In the Flame Kingdom, power was all that mattered. Strength, control, and dominance defined worth. But in Ooh, she discovered something new: cooperation, kindness, and friendship, values that were unfamiliar to her, yet deeply intriguing. The Candy People, with their cheer and laughter, must have seemed impossibly gentle to someone raised among fire and intimidation. Their way of living showed her that perhaps power wasn't always about destruction. It could also be about care, trust, and building bonds. Still, she carried the weight of her fiery nature wherever she went. Simple things that others took for granted, like sitting under a tree or shaking hands, were impossible. Flames rippled across her skin even when she tried to hold them back, making closeness difficult. Imagine the frustration of longing for connection, but knowing that your very touch might scorch it away. This reality kept her guarded, even when her heart urged her forward. One of the most fascinating aspects of Flame Princess's early days in Ooh was how quickly others projected their own fears or desires onto her. To some, she was a threat. A walking blaze could reduce kingdoms to ash. To others, she was a potential ally, powerful, unpredictable, and therefore valuable. And to Finn, she was more than either of those things. She was simply herself, a girl searching for meaning beyond the flame. His ability to see her as a person, rather than just a force of nature, began to chip away at the barrier he had carried from childhood. But that didn't mean things were easy. Her emotions, tied so deeply to her fire, often got the better of her. When she felt anger or betrayal, her flames roared high and fierce, scorching the ground, threatening to spiral out of control. This wasn't simply bad temper. It was part of who she was, an embodiment of the intensity inside her. And though she hated that loss of control, it was also a reminder that her power was real, raw, and impossible to ignore. One early test of her freedom came in the form of her interactions with Princess Bubblegum. PB's sharp mind and calculating nature saw Flame Princess less as a girl and more as a dangerous equation to be solved. Bubblegum worried about what her presence could mean for Ooh, about the instability that could arise if her flames weren't contained. These doubts, though never shouted outright, hung in the air whenever they crossed paths. For Flame Princess, this skepticism reinforced her own insecurity. If even a princess of science and reason couldn't trust her, then maybe she really was destined to be destructive. And yet there were moments of quiet discovery that gave her hope. Think of her first times under Ooh's night sky. For someone who had lived her life beneath the smoke of the Flame Kingdom, seeing stars glimmer above must have been almost magical. The coolness of the night air contrasted with the constant heat she carried inside, reminding her that the world was bigger than the cage she left behind. These moments of wonder were small but vital. They gave her glimpses of the life she might have, a life beyond destruction, beyond fear. Of course, her relationship with Finn threaded through all of this. His kindness, persistence, and awkward bravery were like a guiding light for her, though not always steady. Finn's youth and eagerness sometimes clashed with Flame Princess's raw emotion, leading to misunderstandings and sparks, sometimes literal ones. But even in their missteps, there was a sense of possibility. Through him, she began to believe that she could be seen for who she was, not just for the danger she represented. But freedom also meant choices, and choices meant consequences. Flame Prince wasn't just adjusting to Ooh. Ooh was adjusting to her. Every step she took reshaped the way others thought about her, and in turn, how she thought about herself. Was she a friend or a foe? A ruler in waiting or a wandering flame with no direction? The answers weren't clear, but the questions themselves showed that her journey was only just beginning. Her cage may have opened, but that moment wasn't the end of her struggle. It was the start of a new one. Because stepping into Ooh didn't mean instant belonging. It meant learning how to exist in a world where she could both heal and harm, create and destroy, depending on the choices she made. And as we drift further into her story, we'll see how each encounter, each decision, and each emotion would push her closer to discovering who Flame Princess truly was meant to be. There was something hauntingly beautiful about Flame Princess's earliest steps into freedom. For the first time, she was no longer simply a secret locked away, but a figure moving under the wide sky of Ooh, a flame wandering through a land of endless shapes and colors. Every interaction was layered with discovery, and every discovery carried both joy and unease. The land itself seemed to respond to her presence. Grass hissed and curled when her feet brushed against it. Rivers steamed as she drew near, their waters recoiling from her heat. Even the wind, so gentle across the fields, swirled strangely around her flames, as though nature itself wasn't quite sure whether to embrace her or retreat. In many ways, her earliest days were like those of a child learning to walk. Only the stakes were far higher. Each misstep risked leaving scars on the world around her. And yet there was wonder, too. The Flame Kingdom had been her prison, with walls of fire and stone, echoes of her father's voice and little else. But Ooh was alive. She could hear the songs of distant birds, see colors her flames never allowed her to notice, and feel the strangeness of freedom pressing in on all sides. These small revelations, though easy for others to overlook, must have felt profound to her, like tasting life for the first time. Still, Flame Princess's freedom was not without conflict. Others did not always know how to greet her. To some, she was fascinating, a walking mystery of fire and fury. To others, she was frightening, a threat to their villages and forests. The stories spread quickly. A girl who burned everything she touched. A princess of fire who could bring kingdoms to ruin if her temper slipped. These whispers added weight to every step she took, shaping her reputation before she had a chance to define it herself. It was Finn once again who became the gentle thread holding her to the softer side of Ooh. His excitement, his clumsy yet genuine attempts to understand her, and his willingness to treat her as something more than a weapon, gave her moments of belonging. But this was not a simple fairy tale romance. Their connection was fragile, tender, and constantly tested by the fiery reality of her existence. His very presence reminded her of the duality she lived with, the hope of connection and the danger of harm. A hug, a kiss, even the brush of a hand, all things so natural for others, were fraught with risk. One of the most striking aspects of this period in her life was the contrast between how the world perceived her and how she perceived herself. To her father, she had been dangerous. To Bubblegum, she was unpredictable and needed to be watched. To villagers, she was a rumor to fear. But within herself, she was still uncertain, still growing, still asking the simplest of questions. Who am I, if not the cage I was born into? Her struggles weren't only about controlling her flames. They were about discovering whether she was destined to destroy or whether she could, in time, create. This uncertainty bled into her interactions with others. For example, when confronted with the Princess Bubblegum's cold analysis of her power, Flame Princess felt that familiar sting of mistrust. PB's brilliant mind saw her a problem to be solved, a variable too dangerous to leave unchecked. And though Bubblegum may not have meant cruelty, her skepticism only deepened the Flame Princess's fear that she might never truly fit in. Being regarded as a danger rather than as a person left her both defensive and isolated. But Ooh, in its strange and whimsical way, also gave her chances to see the brighter possibilities of her power. Small creatures drew near to her glow on cold nights, basking in her warmth as though she were a living fire pit. Campfires dimmed in comparison to the steady blaze of her presence, showing that her heat could be comforting, not only destructive. Even the candy people, wary though they were, sometimes gathered near, half afraid, half entranced by the sight of a princess who burned with her own light. These moments, however fleeting, whispered to her that perhaps she was not cursed to harm, that her fire might one day be a blessing. Her path into Ooh was not simply about escape. It was about transformation. Every encounter tested her emotion, and every flare of anger or spark of joy reminded her that her flames were not separate from her, but an extension of who she was. If she was ever to belong in this world, she would need to find balance between her burning nature and her longing for connection. And so, as she moved deeper into the world beyond her cage, Flame Princess carried with her both the burden of fear and the flicker of hope. She was no longer the hidden daughter of a fearful king. She was something new, a princess, stepping cautiously into the unknown, her flames lighting a path that even she could not yet fully see. When Flame Princess's cage was first opened, it might have seemed like freedom was the answer to all her struggle. But true freedom is not simply the absence of wall, it is the presence of choices. And choices are heavy things, especially for someone who had been denied them for so long. Each step through Ooh, each meeting with a new face, was a quiet test of who she might become. One of the clearest lessons she faced was the intensity of her own emotion. For Flame Princess, feelings weren't just fleeting sparks of thought. They were living fires that could change landscape. When she was happy, her flames brightened and danced with warmth. When she was frightened, they flickered and hissed, unstable and searching for release. But when anger or betrayal struck her, the world around her knew it instantly. Trees ignited, stones cracked, and the air itself seemed to recoil from her presence. These moments must have been frightening, not just for those around her, but for Flame Princess herself. To feel emotions so deeply that the earth respond, to know that sorrow or rage could accidentally scorch someone she cares for. This is a burden very few could carry lightly. It was not simply a matter of controlling her flames, but learning how to live with herself, how to accept the intensity within without letting it consume everything she touched. Her time with Finn reflected this delicate balance. He was drawn to her warmth and spirit, and she, in turn, was touched by his kindness and the way he looked past her danger to see her humanity. But love between them was not easy. Their connection carried the constant reminder that closeness had consequences. A simple kiss could mean injury. A moment of anger could mean disaster. Their story in these early days was not just romance. It was a fragile dance between passion and peril, a constant negotiation between wanting closeness and fearing harm. Others, too, were drawn to the gravity of her presence. The rulers and kingdoms of Oo began to take notice of the fiery princess who had once been hidden away. Princess Bubblegum's wary calculation, the Fire King's lingering manipulation, and even Finn and Jake's well-intentioned meddling created a web of expectations. To some, she was a tool. To others, a threat. And yet beneath all of these assumptions, she was still only beginning to discover who she truly was. What made her story so poignant during this stage was the quiet innocence she still carried. Despite being feared, despite her destructive potential, she was not cruel by nature. In fact, much of her behavior reflected the curiosity of someone seeing the world for the first time. A starry sky, a cool breeze, the laughter of friends, these were new and precious things to her. They softened the edges of her fire, reminding both herself and others that beneath the flames was simply a girl yearning to belong. But belonging was not easy to claim. Each time she reached for it, the world reminded her of her difference. A tree reduced to cinders when she leaned against it. A frightened villager pulling away from her touch. Even Finn, who cared so much, could not entirely escape the fear of being burned. These moments chipped at her confidence, making her wonder if perhaps the cage had been more than just a prison. It might have been a protection, keeping the world safe from her and her safe from rejection. And yet, the truth of Flame Princess that she was never meant to remain hidden. Her very nature as fire is to be seen, to burn, to transform everything it touches. To cage her was to deny the world both her danger and her beauty. By stepping into Oo, she began the long process of showing that flames can destroy, yes, but they can also illuminate, warm, and inspire. Her early days outside the cage revealed not only her struggles, but also the possibility of growth, of change, of becoming something greater than what fear had defined her to be. As this chapter of her journey closed, Flame Princess stood at a crossroad, no longer confined, but not yet certain of her place. Caught between the echoes of her father's warnings and the pull of new connections, she was both fragile and powerful, both feared and needed. Her cage had opened, but the true test lay ahead. To build a life not defined by fire alone, but by the choices she would make with it. And so, as we drift gently into the next part of her tale, we carry with us the image of a young princess stepping into a vast and uncertain world, her flames flickering not just with danger, but with possibility. Her story was only beginning, and Oo would never be the same again. Now that Flame Princess has begun to explore the world of Oo, her journey naturally moves toward one of the most tender yet turbulent chapters of her story, her connection with Finn the human. Tonight we'll drift into that tale, one of love, growth, and the quiet struggles that come with being more than what the world expects. From the very first spark of their encounter, there was something electric about Finn and Flame Princess together. Though not simply because of her literal fire, Finn was drawn to her spirit, her strength, and her raw authenticity, qualities he rarely encountered in a world full of rules, expectations, and political intrigue. For Flame Princess, Finn represented a kind of warmth entirely different from the heat she carried within her. His presence was comforting, human in a way that no one from the Flame Kingdom had ever been. He was unafraid, genuinely curious, and determined to understand her rather than fear her. Their early moments together were delicate dances of trust and caution. For Flame Prince, touch could ignite, and emotion could flare unpredictably. Finn had to learn, often the hard way, that being close to her meant accepting risk. Every embrace and every gesture of affection was a negotiation between desire and restraint. And yet, despite the danger, there was a tenderness that threaded through their interaction, a quiet acknowledgement that connection was possible, even for someone made of fire. Love, as they discovered, was not simple. The story of Finn and Flame Princess is not one of instant joy or untroubled harmony. It was filled with moments of misunderstanding, fear, and the struggle to balance passion with restraint. For Flame Princess, every emotional surge risked damaging someone she cared about, while Finn had to navigate the fine line between supporting her and protecting himself. Their relationship became a careful choreography of care and caution, a reflection of the broader theme of her life, that power in its rawest form requires balance. Beyond the literal heat she carried, Flame Princess grappled with the expectations placed upon her. Her father's lingering influence and the political realities of ruling a kingdom meant that love could not exist in isolation. Finn had to understand not only her emotion, but the legacy of fear and control that shaped her. And for Flame Princess, loving Finn was an exercise in trust, a test of whether someone could see past her fire to the person she truly was beneath it. Their bond also highlighted the contrast between innocence and responsibility. Finn, though courageous and morally strong, was still young, still learning the depth of consequences. Flame Princess, by contrast, had been forced to mature quickly, to navigate emotions and power that most could never comprehend. Their love was not only an emotional journey, but a meeting of perspective, one of human vulnerability and one of elemental intensity. Each step forward was a lesson in patience, understanding, and self-awareness. Moments of joy were intertwined with moments of difficulty. Imagine the first time they held hands fully, knowing that even the simplest act could burn. Or the first time Flame Princess tried to control her temper and failed, leaving Finn singed and frightened. These experiences were not merely physical. They were deeply symbolic of the challenges inherent in their relationship. To love someone who carries immense power is to accept uncertainty, to learn resilience, and to embrace the beauty and risk of connection simultaneously. In many ways, their relationship mirrored the broader narrative of Ooh itself. Just as the land is filled with strange beings, unpredictable magic, and shifting alliance, so too was their love shaped by volatility and wonder. Their story reminds us that growth often comes through challenge, that trust and intimacy are forged in the quiet moments of vulnerability, and that even in a world that fears what is different, love can still take root. Flame Princess's journey with Finn was also a profound journey of self-discovery. In learning to navigate love, she learned more about the limits and possibilities of her own power. In moments of intimacy, she explored the gentleness within her, recognizing that her flames could warm rather than only burn. Finn's presence offered her a mirror, reflecting the potential for tenderness that had been buried beneath years of fear and isolation. Yet, as tender as their moments together were, the shadows of her past and her nature never fully vanished. Flame Princess struggled with trust, with understanding her own emotional responses, and with reconciling her desire for connection with the reality of her power. Every argument, every misstep became a lesson, not in failure, but in growth, a slow, deliberate shaping of someone learning to live fully as herself while loving another. And so the story of Finn and Flame Princess is one of balance. It is about finding harmony between light and heat, vulnerability and strength, fear and trust. Their love, while young and at times fragile, carried within it the possibility of transformation, not just for themselves, but for the world around them. Ooh, a land of chaos and wonder, mirrored the challenges, unpredictable, beautiful, and constantly evolving. In these early stages, their relationship also reflected broader truths about human or elemental connection. Love, they discovered, is rarely simple. It requires patience, forgiveness, and the willingness to face risks. For Flame Princess, each emotional surge was both a test and a lesson, teaching her not only about herself, but about the kind of companion she wished to be. For Finn, each interaction taught him empathy, courage, and the need to honor the boundaries of someone whose world was quite literally ablaze. Even the quiet moments were transformative. Sitting together under the night sky, the stars above twinkling in patterns she had never seen, Flame Princess learned that the world could be gentle and expansive, not only consuming. Finn's presence was a reminder that love could coexist with her power, that she did not need to hide or fear herself to be worthy of connection. These small, seemingly ordinary experiences carried the profound magic of teaching her trust, patience, and hope. As their connection deepened, the complexities of their feelings began to surface. Flame Princess's love for Finn was intense and genuine, yet it carried with it the weight of her experiences and her elemental nature. Every surge of emotion had the potential to either nurture or hurt, to illuminate or scorch. She was learning that love was not only about closeness, but about responsibility, the responsibility to understand her own limits and the impact her presence had on someone she cared for deeply. Finn, too, was learning in ways he had never imagined. His usual confidence and heroism were tested by the very human fragility of emotional bonds with someone so powerful. He was confronted with the reality that bravery alone could not solve every problem. Patience, empathy, and attentiveness became his new tools, and each misstep was a lesson in humility. In trying to navigate their relationship, he discovered that understanding another being, especially one so unlike himself, was a delicate art, requiring more than courage or heroic. Conflict was inevitable, as it often is when power and emotion intertwine. Flame Princess struggled to regulate her anger and fear, sometimes lashing out in moments of uncertainty or hurt. Finn, though careful, could not always predict how his actions might affect her or trigger her flame. Their disagreements were never simply misunderstanding. They were reflections of the challenge inherent in connecting across differences of experience, temperament, and even elemental essence. And yet, even in conflict was growth. Each argument, each tension-filled moment, became an opportunity to learn more about boundaries, communication, and mutual respect. Flame Princess discovered that she could express herself without resorting to destructive outbursts, that her emotions could be acknowledged rather than suppressed. Finn, in turn, realized that love requires listening more than acting, observing as much as reaching out. Their bond, forged in these trials, became deeper and more nuanced with every test. At times, external pressures magnified these challenges. The Fire King's manipulation, though less immediate than in her childhood, continued to haunt her. His occasional appearances, his demands, and his lingering expectation reminded her that freedom was never absolute. In her heart, she grappled with the duality of wanting independence while still seeking connection, of desiring love without losing control of the very thing that defined her. Yet there were moments of pure magic that reminded her why she allowed herself to hope: a shared adventure, a quiet conversation under the stars, a gesture of care from Finn. These fleeting instants carried immense weight. They demonstrated that love could coexist with her fire, that connection could flourish even when her life had been defined by isolation and fear. It was in these small, tender moments that she began to trust not only Finn but herself, learning that her emotion could illuminate rather than only consume. Her journey with Finn also highlighted an essential truth about her nature, that fire, like love, is transformative. It can destroy, yes, but it can also create warmth, foster growth, and inspire courage. Through their interactions, she began to see her own flames in a new light, recognizing that they were not inherently dangerous. They were powerful tools capable of shaping the world in ways beyond mere destruction. At the same time, the volatility of her power and emotions reminded her of the fragility of connection. Every heated argument, every mismanaged outburst served as a cautionary lesson that love must be handled with care. Finn's presence helped her navigate this balance, teaching her that closeness required both courage and restraint. In this way, their relationship was not only about romantic affection, but about mutual growth and understanding. And so the early days of Flame Princess and Finn's relationship were a careful dance between fear and desire, between restraint and expression, between the past she carried and the future she longed to create. Each step forward was met with both possibility and challenge, each spark of connection intertwined with lessons of patience, empathy, and trust. Their love, though young and complicated, became a mirror reflecting Flame Princess's journey, a journey from isolation to interaction, from fear to understanding, from being defined by others to discovering her own identity. It was a reminder that even in a world filled with magic, danger, and unpredictability, connection and understanding were possible, and that the courage to love was, in itself, a transformative power. As Flame Princess and Finn's bond grew, so too did the challenges that tested it. Love in their world was never a simple, unbroken path. Every surge of flame, every flicker of doubt, and every external interference reminded them that connection requires more than desire. It requires understanding, patience, and sometimes painful compromise. One of the first obstacles they encountered was the lingering shadow of the Fire King. Though Flame Princess had stepped out of her cage and into Ooh, her father's influence had not vanished. His sporadic interventions, his warning, and the occasional manipulations reminded her that she was never entirely free from the weight of her past. And while Finn could offer companionship and support, he could not entirely shield her from the reality of her heritage. These moments forced Flame Princess to confront the duality of her existence, the girl she wanted to be and the fire she could not deny. At the same time, Finn himself had to navigate the emotional complexities of loving someone so intense. He discovered that bravery in battle did not always translate to bravery in matters of the heart. Patience, empathy, and careful attentiveness became just as vital as courage. Learning to respond rather than react, to listen rather than act impulsively, was a daily lesson. And as he learned, so too did Flame Princess begin to trust more deeply, recognizing that Finn's care was not fleeting but persistent, not conditional but steadfast. Conflict inevitably arose from within as well. Flame Princess's emotional intensity, intertwined with her elemental power, sometimes led to misunderstanding. A flare of anger could be misinterpreted as malice, a burst of emotion as instability. These moments, while natural for someone learning to navigate the world, created tension between her and Finn. And yet, they also became critical points of growth. Each disagreement required communication, reflection, and compromise, teaching them both that love is as much about navigating difficulties as it is about celebrating joy. Their relationship was also deeply shaped by the broader world of Ooh, the kingdom itself with its political intrigue, magical anomaly, and unpredictable dangers constantly influenced their dynamic. Princess Bubblegum's cautious oversight, the Fire King's lingering presence, and even the expectations of the citizens added layers of pressure. Flame Princess had to learn to balance personal desires with the responsibilities and perceptions tied to her status, while Finn had to understand that love in Ooh often intersects with the larger forces beyond simple emotion. Despite these challenges, the moments of tenderness and connection were profound. Imagine them sitting together under the night sky, the stars reflecting in the calm pools of water nearby. Flame Princess's flame would soften, casting a gentle glow around them. Finn's steady presence, his warmth and attention, allowed her to feel both seen and safe. In these quiet instances, they discovered the true depth of their bond. It was not just affection, but a profound mutual recognition of vulnerability and strength. Yet heartbreak was inevitable. Misunderstandings, the weight of expectation, and the unpredictability of her power sometimes led to painful separation. These moments, though difficult, were crucial for both. Flame Princess learned resilience, understanding that love could involve loss and still remain meaningful. Finn learned the importance of respect, patience, and accepting that some challenges cannot be immediately solved. Each heartache became a lesson, shaping their growth and teaching them about the balance between attachment and autonomy. Throughout this period, Flame Princess's self-discovery deepened. Her love for Finn was inseparable from her journey of understanding her own power and identity. Through him, she began to see that her flames were not solely instruments of destruction. They were extensions of her emotion, capable of warmth, illumination, and creation. Love became both a mirror and a guide, reflecting her potential and encouraging her to harness her intensity with wisdom and care. Their story was a vivid illustration of a broader truth. Connection with another being, especially one so complex, is never easy, but it is transformative. Flame Princess's journey with Finn taught her that vulnerability is not weakness, that trust can coexist with power, and that emotional intensity, when guided with care, can become a source of profound beauty. And as their relationship continued to unfold, it became clear that the love between Flame Princess and Finn was more than a romance. It was a catalyst for growth, an arena for learning, and a bridge between isolation and connection. The challenges they faced, the misunderstandings they endured, and the moments of tender intimacy all contributed to her evolution. Not just as a princess of fire, but as a person capable of shaping her own destiny within the vast, unpredictable world of Ooh. As time unfolded, the story of Finn and Flame Princess took on a deeper complexity. Their love, tender and fierce, was tested not only by external forces, but also by the natural rhythms of their own hearts. Flame Princess, still learning the bounds of her power and the reach of her emotions, sometimes found herself overwhelmed by the intensity she carried. Moments of frustration or fear could ignite her flames unexpectedly, leaving both her and Finn to navigate the delicate aftermath. It was in these trials that Flame Princess began to understand the true meaning of responsibility, not just to others, but to herself. Love, she realized, could not exist in a vacuum. To care for someone, to trust someone, required introspection, patience, and the willingness to confront one's own impulses. Her fiery nature, while beautiful and powerful, demanded awareness. Every misstep became a lesson. That connection is a negotiation between desire and restraint, passion and gentleness, independence and intimacy. Finn, for his part, also faced growth. His courage had always been physical, his heroism measured in battles fought and challenges overcome. But with Flame Princess, he discovered that bravery of the heart could be far more complex. It required empathy, attentiveness, and the humility to accept that he could not always fix every problem. He learned to hold space for Flame Princess's emotions, to respect the fire within her, and to see her not as someone to be tamed, but as someone to understand. The peaks of their relationship, moments of connection, laughter, and warmth, were breathtaking precisely because they were hard-earned. A shared smile, a quiet conversation, or the simple joy of being near one another became treasures. Each instance reminded Flame Princess that her power could coexist with love, that her flame could illuminate rather than scorch. And each time Finn demonstrated patience or courage in understanding her, it strengthened the fragile bridge between their worlds. Yet the path of love in Ooh is rarely linear. Miscommunications and misunderstandings crept in like shadows. Flame Princess's insecurities, long shaped by the fear and control of the Fire King, sometimes surfaced unexpectedly. A flicker of doubt could escalate into tension. A moment of hesitation could ignite a misunderstanding. Finn, despite his best intentions, occasionally faltered under the weight of her intensity, discovering that words and actions could be misinterpreted in ways he hadn't anticipated. It was in these moments of conflict that both of them learned resilience. Flame Princess realized that love did not have to be perfect to be meaningful, that mistakes could coexist with affection, and that patience with oneself is as essential as patience with another. Finn, in turn, grasped that connection requires listening more than speaking, that understanding another's boundaries is as vital as expressing one's own, and that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are quiet and emotional rather than heroic and loud. Inevitably, heartbreak entered their story. Circumstances, emotional turbulence, and the reality of living in a world as unpredictable as Ooh created rifts that could not be easily bridged. These separations, though painful, were formative. Flame Princess learned the profound lesson that love sometimes requires letting go, that care does not always mean possession, and that self-discovery often comes through moments of loss. Finn, too, experienced the bittersweet realization that even the purest intentions cannot always prevent pain, and that respect for another's growth may mean stepping back. In the quiet aftermath of their struggle, both of them found space for reflection. Flame Prince began to recognize that her identity was not solely defined by her fire, nor by the approval or fear of others. She was learning to integrate her passion, her temper, and her vulnerability into a coherence of self. Love, she realized, was a mirror reflecting not only what one desires in another, but what one must cultivate within oneself: patience, empathy, and self-awareness. Their eventual parting was not a failure, but a natural evolution of their story. It marked a shift from dependency to independence, from intensity to balance. Flame Princess emerged stronger, more self-assured, and increasingly aware of her own potential, not just as a princess of fire, but as a being capable of shaping her world and relationships with thoughtfulness and care. Finn, too, carried the lessons of their time together, learning that love is as much about growth and respect as it is about affection and closeness. The tale of Finn and Flame Princess is one of both fire and warmth, of risk and tenderness, of heartbreak and profound connection. It reminds us that love, especially between beings so different and so powerful, is rarely easy, but always transformative. Their story is a meditation on understanding, patience, and the courage to embrace both vulnerability and strength. As we reflect on this chapter, we see that Flame Princess's relationship with Finn was not simply a romance. It was a crucible for growth, a space in which she confronted her fears, explored the limits of her emotions, and learned to navigate connection without losing herself. Each spark, each flare, each quiet moment of trust contributed to her evolution, shaping the princess she was becoming: strong, self-aware, and capable of wielding both fire and heart with grace. As we drift into the next chapter of Flame Princess's story, we enter a period of transformation, challenge, and self-discovery. After her experiences in love and her early steps into Ooh, she faced a new and daunting reality, stepping fully into her role as the ruler of fire. Tonight, we'll explore her struggles for identity, autonomy, and the delicate balance of power that shaped her journey. Flame Princess's path to rulership was never straightforward. Unlike other rulers in Ooh who were raised with ceremony, training, and counsel, she had been locked away for most of her life. Her education had been incomplete, her experiences confined, and her understanding of herself fragmented. To step into the role of leadership meant reconciling the girl who had been hidden in the Flame Kingdom with the woman who could command kingdoms and inspire others. It was a challenge that demanded both courage and introspection. The first trials came not from external enemies, but from within. Flame Princess had to confront the deep-seated fears instilled by her father: Flame King's manipulations, warning, and the ever-present shadow of control left her questioning her own capacity to rule wisely. She wrestled with the fear that her nature, intense, passionate, and sometimes uncontrollable, made her inherently unfit to govern. Could a being of fire, so easily flared and so feared, ever truly lead with justice and compassion? These questions weighed heavily on her as she began to step into her new responsibilities. One of the first acts of leadership was asserting independence from her father's influence. Flame King, though absent much of the time, remained a figure of authority in her mind. She had to learn to make decisions without his guidance, to trust her instinct, and to recognize that her power was hers alone. This process was not instantaneous. It came through trial and error, through moments of doubt, and through the slow realization that she could wield her flames not as a weapon of fear, but as a symbol of strength and protection. Her relationships with other rulers in Ooh also tested her understanding of power. Princess Bubblegum, ever cautious and analytical, challenged her assumptions and sometimes her authority. Peebee's intellect and foresight were a mirror in which Flame Princess could see the gaps in her own knowledge and strategy. At first, these interactions were uncomfortable, highlighting her insecurities, but over time they became opportunities for growth. She learned diplomacy and the subtleties of negotiation and the importance of foresight in leadership. The world of Ooh required more than raw power. It required vision and patience, qualities she gradually developed. Flame Princess also had to contend with the perceptions of her subjects. The citizens of the Fire Kingdom had grown up with the fear of fire and the shadow of her father's rule. Many were wary of her, uncertain if she would repeat the mistakes of Flame King or succumb to her fiery temper. Leadership demanded that she earn their trust, demonstrate her capability, and show that fire could be both protective and constructive. This process was slow and deliberate, requiring her to balance authority with approachability, strength with empathy, and passion with restraint. A particularly formative aspect of her journey was learning to channel her emotions into leadership rather than letting them control her. Flame Princess's flames were inseparable. Her feeling, joy, anger, fear, and love, all manifested in bursts of heat and light. Early on, this volatility sometimes led to unintended consequences: scorched landscapes, frightened citizens, and tension with allies. But gradually, she discovered methods of control, strategies to temper her reactions, and techniques to use her fire intentionally. In this way, her emotional intelligence became intertwined with her political skill. At the heart of her growth was the realization that power and identity are deeply connected. To rule effectively, she had to understand herself, not just as a princess of fire, but as an individual with desires, fears, and values. She explored her motivation, questioned her assumptions, and reflected on her goals. Leadership was not simply about commanding respect or asserting dominance. It was about creating a vision, guiding others, and embodying the principles she wished to see reflected in her kingdom. Her struggles for identity also intersected with her relationships. Past connections, especially with Finn, informed her understanding of empathy, compromise, and emotional responsibility. She learned that leadership was not isolation. It required connection, communication, and the ability to inspire trust and loyalty. At the same time, she discovered the necessity of boundaries, recognizing that true authority comes from self-awareness and self-discipline as much as from influence over others. As Flame Princess navigated these early challenges, the landscape of the Fire Kingdom itself mirrored her growth. Volcanic terrain, rivers of molten lava, and towering flames reflected both the danger and potential of her leadership. To rule such a kingdom and embracing her elemental nature fully, understanding its power, and using it to protect rather than dominate. Her command over fire became a metaphor for her control over herself. Intense, bright, and commanding, yet guided by wisdom and restraint. As Flame Princess settled into her role, the realities of ruling a kingdom became increasingly complex. Leadership, she learned, was rarely a matter of simple decision. Every choice carried consequences, not only for herself, but for her subjects, allies, and the delicate balance of Oo's interconnected realm. Fire, after all, is both a creative and destructive force, and wielding it wisely required more than instinct. It demanded discernment, foresight, and courage tempered with empathy. Her early attempts at governance revealed both her strengths and her vulnerabilities. When disputes arose among her citizens, her initial reactions were often impulsive, fueled by emotion rather than reason. Flames flared in response to perceived disrespect or challenge, sometimes unintentionally harming those she sought to protect. These missteps were humbling, reminding her that authority is not measured by power alone, but by the ability to guide, to listen, and to respond with intention. Each incident became a lesson, shaping the way she approached leadership with increasing care and thoughtfulness. External threats also tested her resolve. Ooh is a world of unpredictability, and as ruler of fire, Flame Princess could not remain isolated from its chaos. Encounters with rival kingdoms, adventurers, and magical phenomena forced her to develop strategy, diplomacy, and the capacity to act decisively under pressure. Her fiery nature, once a source of anxiety and isolation, became an asset when wielded with control. Flames that once threatened to consume now served as both protection and a symbol of authority, demonstrating that her power could be a source of stability rather than fear. The evolution of her identity was intertwined with the expectations of others. Citizens of the Fire Kingdom looked to her for guidance, safety, and inspiration. Allies, including Finn and other adventurers, sought her leadership in matters that extended beyond her realm. At times, these expectations were burdensome, reminding her that freedom comes with responsibility and that autonomy is inseparable from accountability. Yet with each challenge she faced, Flame Princess learned to reconcile the fire within with the responsibility she carried, growing more confident in her decisions and her capacity to lead. Internally, she continued to wrestle with the duality of her nature. Her flames, while powerful and beautiful, reflected the intensity of her emotion. Anger, frustration, and fear could all manifest in destructive ways if left unchecked, while compassion, hope, and care could illuminate the world around her. Leadership demanded mastery over both her abilities and her temperament, a conscious effort to align her actions with her values rather than letting her impulses dictate outcome. Relationships with other rulers shaped this growth in subtle yet profound ways. Princess Bubblegum, ever analytical, offered counsel and occasionally challenge, reminding Flame Princess that leadership was as much about intellect as it was about strength. These interactions were not always easy. PB's cautious demeanor and strategic thinking sometimes clashed with Flame Princess's passionate instincts, but they were invaluable in teaching her the importance of perspective, collaboration, and measured judgment. Flame Princess also had to navigate the delicate balance between personal desires and the needs of her kingdom. Her past, particularly the scars left by her father's manipulation and the isolation of the Flame Kingdom, lingered as reminders that leadership required both resilience and self-awareness. Decisions were rarely simple. The well-being of her people, and the stability of her realm, and her own sense of self were constantly intertwined. Each choice became a reflection of her evolving identity, a testament to her growth from a hidden princess into a capable, self-assured ruler. Through these experiences, she began to see the broader significance of her role. Power, she realized, was not an end in itself, but a means to shape the world with intention. Flames could destroy, yes, but they could also illuminate, guide, and protect. Her rule was not merely about asserting dominance, but about cultivating balance, ensuring that her kingdom thrived without succumbing to the volatility of unchecked passion. As Flame Princess matured in her role, she came to understand that ruling a kingdom was as much about restraint as it was about action. Each decision carried the weight of consequence, and she learned to weigh her impulses against the needs of those who looked to her for guidance. Power, she realized, was not simply about the magnitude of one's flames, it was about the intention behind them. She began to see that a controlled spark could warm, inspire, and illuminate far more than an uncontrolled blaze ever could. The Fire Kingdom itself became a reflection of her personal growth. Once wild, chaotic, and prone to danger, its lands began to mirror her evolving mastery of self. Rivers of molten lava flowed with measured grace. Mountains glowed with a steady warmth, and the people learned to move within her light rather than fearing it. Her rule was not about erasing her fiery nature, but about channeling it in ways that created life, security, and hope, rather than destruction. In this way, the kingdom and the princess grew together, each shaping the other in subtle, profound ways. Challenges, of course, continued to test her leadership. Other rulers and kingdoms sometimes questioned her authority, curious or cautious about the young princess who wielded both literal and symbolic fire. Flame Princess had to learn diplomacy, strategy, and negotiation, discovering that influence extends beyond force or intimidation. True leadership, she realized, required listening, understanding, and sometimes compromise. Her growth was not merely in controlling her flame, but in mastering the art of guidance, inspiring loyalty through wisdom as much as power. Her internal struggles were equally significant. Flame Princess had spent so much of her life defined by fear, her father's cage, the caution of others, and the unpredictability of her own power, that self-doubt lingered beneath her confidence. Every decision was accompanied by quiet reflection. Was this the right course? Would my actions protect or harm? Could I be both a strong ruler and a compassionate leader? These questions became the rhythm of her daily life, shaping her character and deepening her understanding of what it truly meant to be sovereign. Relationships continued to play a pivotal role in this journey. Finn, though no longer the central figure in her daily governance, remained an influence. The lessons learned in love about patience, understanding, and emotional responsibility carried into her leadership. She recognized that true authority is not exercised in isolation. It is reinforced through empathy, collaboration, and the trust of those she leads. Even past heartbreak informed her ability to balance intensity with compassion, power with care. One of the most profound lessons came from observing the consequence of unchecked emotion. Flame Princess remembered moments when her flames had spiraled beyond her control, leaving scars on both the land and those around her. These memories were not sources of shame, but of insight. They reminded her that leadership requires self-regulation, that strength without understanding can harm, and that the greatest rulers are those who recognize their own limits as clearly as they recognize their capability. Her relationship with the Princess Bubblegum continued to be a subtle crucible of growth. PB's strategic mind and cautious approach often clashed with Flame Princess's passionate instincts, yet these tensions were instructive. They provided a space to practice negotiation, to refine judgment, and to see the broader consequences of one's decisions. Over time, Flame Princess began to integrate these lessons, blending her natural intensity with the measured perspective necessary to govern wisely. In the quieter moments, away from politics and power struggle, Flame Princess also reflected on her personal evolution. She had transformed from a hidden, caged child into a figure of authority and presence. Her fire, once unpredictable and feared, had become a symbol of her identity, a living expression of both her strength and her care. She realized that being a ruler was not about perfection, but about the ability to grow, adapt, and face challenges with integrity. By mastering both her internal world and the external demands of her kingdom, Flame Princess began to solidify her identity as ruler of fire. She was no longer simply the daughter of the Fire King or the girl who had been feared. She was a sovereign in her own right, capable of guiding her people and shaping her world. Her power, once a source of isolation, had become a tool for leadership, and her flames, once chaotic, now carried the warmth of intention and the light of purpose. As Flame Princess moved further into her role, she began to see leadership as a reflection of her own growth, a way to channel her intensity into purpose rather than letting it remain a source of fear. She understood that power without understanding could isolate her, but power wielded with care could unite her kingdom and inspire those around her. Each decision, each measured display of her flames, became a demonstration not only of her authority, but of the maturity she had cultivated through struggle and reflection. Her consolidation of power was gradual, a careful weaving of strength, empathy, and wisdom. Flame Princess learned to listen attentively to her advisors and citizens, recognizing that knowledge and perspective could enhance her own instinct. When disputes arose within the kingdom, she approached them with patience, weighing the consequences of each choice and seeking resolutions that reflected both justice and compassion. Over time, her people began to see her not as the volatile daughter of the Fire King, but as a sovereign whose presence brought stability and warmth. Challenges, of course, never disappeared entirely. Threats from rival kingdoms, magical anomalies, and the ever-shifting politics of Ooh reminded Flame Princess that leadership is a constant exercise in vigilance and adaptability. She learned to anticipate danger, to act decisively when necessary, and to trust her own judgment in moments of uncertainty. Her flames, once a symbol of uncontrolled passion, became a metaphor for her capacity to balance force with wisdom, intensity with restraint. In the quiet hours, she reflected on her personal evolution. The cage of her childhood, once a symbol of fear and isolation, now seemed a distant memory, yet its lessons remained etched into her understanding of herself and her world. She had learned the value of autonomy, the importance of mastering one's impulses, and the necessity of tempering power with care. Her identity was no longer defined by the control of others or the reactions of those around her. It was forged in the deliberate choices she made each day, in the conscious shaping of both her actions and her inner self. Her relationships continued to influence her growth, though in subtler ways than before. Past connections, including her experiences with Finn, had taught her about empathy, vulnerability, and the power of trust. These lessons carried into her rulership, informing the way she engaged with her citizens and allies. She understood that authority was strengthened not by fear, but by respect and understanding, and that true leadership required both emotional intelligence and strategic vision. Perhaps one of the most significant aspects of her evolution was her acceptance of her own duality. Flame Princess came to see that her fire was not simply a weapon or a danger. It was an extension of herself, capable of both destruction and creation. In this realization lay profound empowerment. She could embrace her intensity without being consumed by it, and she could use her strength to nurture, protect, and inspire. Her flames became a symbol of self-possession, a visible manifestation of her maturity, courage, and discernment. Moments of triumph, though quieter than battles or dramatic displays, were deeply meaningful. When disputes within the kingdom were resolved peacefully, when citizens felt secure and valued, or when she successfully mediated tensions between rival parties, Flame Princess felt the quiet satisfaction of leadership done with wisdom and care. These victories, subtle yet profound, reinforced her confidence and affirmed the growth she had achieved through years of challenge and reflection. Her emergence as a self-assured ruler was also accompanied by a sense of personal clarity. Flame Princess no longer viewed her identity through the lens of her father's shadow, the limitations of her early life, or the fears of others. She recognized herself as a sovereign in her own right, a being of power and passion, capable of shaping her own destiny. Her flames, ever luminous and alive, were now a source of pride and purpose, reflecting the harmony she had cultivated between her inner fire and the responsibilities of leadership. By the end of this period, Flame Princess had transformed from a hidden, uncertain girl into a confident and capable ruler. She embodied the balance between strength and compassion, intensity and restraint, autonomy and connection. Her kingdom, once unstable and fearful, now flourished under her guidance, and she herself had become a figure of inspiration, not merely for her people, but for anyone who understood the challenge of reconciling power with responsibility. The story of Flame Princess as ruler of fire reminds us that true leadership is not defined solely by might or authority, but by the deliberate cultivation of self-awareness, empathy, and integrity. Her journey illustrates that identity is shaped through challenge, reflection, and the willingness to confront both one's strengths and vulnerability. In embracing her fire fully, she discovered that power can illuminate rather than destroy, that passion can guide rather than consume, and that a ruler's greatest strength lies in understanding not only the world she governs, but herself. As we settle into the next chapter of Flame Princess's story, we find ourselves exploring a period of quiet transformation. Having stepped fully into her role as ruler of fire, she now faces an even subtler and more profound challenge, learning to balance her power, her emotions, her place in the vast, unpredictable world of Ooh. Tonight, we'll drift gently into her journey of growth, change, and the ongoing search for harmony within herself and her kingdom. Even a ruler as capable as Flame Princess cannot remain static. Power, like fire itself, demands evolution. She realized that ruling was not only about action, but also reflection, and that her growth depended as much on understanding herself as it did on guiding others. Her flames, which had once been wild and reactive, became both a mirror and a teacher, reflecting the intensity of her emotions while offering her insight into how to channel them with purpose and care. This period of change was marked by quiet introspection. Flame Princess spent hours considering her own responses, observing how her moods influenced her actions, and contemplating the ways in which her strength could both illuminate and harm. It was a gentle, ongoing exercise in mindfulness. A realization that true power lies not in unrestrained force, but in the awareness and intention that guide it. Each moment of reflection added layers to her understanding of herself and her place in the wider tapestry of Ooh. Growth also required her to confront the lingering shadows of her past. Even as she matured into a capable ruler, the echoes of her father's manipulation and the isolation of her childhood remained present, subtle yet insistent. Flame Princess learned that these memories were not obstacles to suppress, but truths to acknowledge. By facing them with honesty, she gained perspective on her fears, her impulses, and her capacity to make choices independent of external influence. This internal reckoning became a foundation for her evolving sense of self. The world around her reflected and reinforced this journey. Ooh is a land of constant flux, filled with magical anomalies, unexpected alliances, and shifting landscapes that test every ruler's judgment. Flame Princess discovered that balance was not a static state, but a continuous process of adjustment and adaptation. Just as fire interacts differently with water, air, and earth, she learned to respond to the diverse needs of her people, the pressures of political alliance, and the unpredictable challenges of her environment. Leadership, she realized, is a living practice, shaped by responsiveness as much as intention. Relationships, both old and new, also played a critical role in this period of development. Interactions with Finn had left a lasting imprint, teaching her the importance of empathy, patience, and trust. Even after the complexities of their romantic history, the lessons she carried forward informed her understanding of connection, emotional responsibility, and the subtle dynamics of influence. Other rulers, adventurers, and citizens contributed as well, providing perspectives that challenged her assumptions and encouraged further self-reflection. A significant aspect of her growth was learning to recognize and honor boundaries, both her own and those of others. Flame Princess came to understand that true strength is not measured by the absence of limits, but by the wisdom to operate within them. This insight extended to her governance, her personal relationships, and her self-concept. Her flames, once driven purely by instinct and emotion, now served as a metaphor for controlled power, bright, alive, and capable of warmth without destruction. Her journey also involved embracing flexibility and the acceptance of change. Flame Princess realized that rigidity, whether in thought, emotion, or strategy, could lead to stagnation or unintended harm. Growth required openness, a willingness to experiment, to fail, and to adjust. She began to see each challenge not as a threat, but as an opportunity to refine her approach, deepen her understanding, and strengthen her capacity to lead with both courage and compassion. In quieter, more introspective moments, Flame Princess explored the interplay between solitude and connection. As a ruler, she recognized the necessity of both reflection and interaction. Time spent alone allowed her to consider her choices, meditate on her impulses, and regain equilibrium. Time spent with allies and citizens reminded her that leadership is relational and that understanding others' experiences enriches her capacity to govern thoughtfully. This rhythm of solitude and engagement became a subtle, guiding force in her journey toward balance. As Flame Princess navigated this delicate balance, she also came to appreciate the importance of patience, both with herself and with the world around her. Growth, she realized, cannot be rushed. Just as fire spreads gradually and unpredictably across the landscape, so too do understanding, mastery, and wisdom unfold over time. She began to embrace the rhythm of her own development, allowing moments of introspection and contemplation to shape her decisions rather than being driven solely by impulse or urgency. The challenges she faced were not always dramatic or overt. Many were subtle, quiet tests of character and judgment. A disagreement between advisors, a minor conflict among her citizens, or a shift in the politics of Ooh could reveal underlying tensions, requiring her to navigate them with care. Flame Princess discovered that leadership is as much about listening and observing as it is about action. Every choice was layered with consequences, some immediately visible, others unfolding slowly, reminding her that foresight and reflection are essential companions to power. Her emotions, once unpredictable and overwhelming, became tools for insight rather than sources of instability. Anger, once dangerous in its intensity, was now an indicator of injustice or imbalance, prompting her to act with intention rather than reflex. Joy, excitement, and love illuminated paths forward, inspiring connection and trust. Flame Princess learned that her inner world was a compass, guiding her decisions and shaping her relationships, both personal and political. By attuning to these internal signals, she discovered a more nuanced, sustainable approach to her authority and her life. The influence of her past continued to inform her journey, but she no longer felt constrained by it. Memories of isolation, fear, and the manipulations of her father became touchstones rather than shackles. She understood that while her history shaped her, it did not define her. Every choice she made, every interaction she nurtured, was an act of self-determination, a conscious shaping of the person she wished to become. Flame Princess's identity, once fragmented by circumstance and expectation, began to cohere around principles of balance, intention, and self-awareness. Her relationships with others in OO offered additional lessons in growth. Princess Bubblegum's counsel remained valuable, providing a strategic perspective that complemented Flame Princess's emotional intuition. Allies and citizens contributed insights that challenged her assumption, encouraged empathy, and revealed blind spots. Even adversaries, through conflict or opposition, offered opportunities to refine her judgment and reinforce her resilience. She began to see that balance is not only about internal harmony, but also about navigating the complexity of a world filled with diverse perspectives, ambitions, and needs. A critical part of this journey was learning to integrate personal desire with responsibility. Flame Princess recognized that leadership does not require the suppression of passion, but its mindful application. Her flames could still burn brightly, yet she discovered how to temper them with care, using her intensity to inspire rather than intimidate, to create rather than consume. This integration of personal energy with external responsibility became a defining feature of her evolving character. At the same time, she explored the subtle interplay between strength and vulnerability. Leadership, she realized, is not the absence of fear or doubt, but the ability to act in their presence with clarity and courage. She allowed herself moments of reflection, admitted mistakes when necessary, and embraced vulnerability as a source of authenticity rather than weakness. This acceptance deepened her connections, built trust, and created a foundation for both personal fulfillment and effective governance. In these months of growth and change, Flame Princess's understanding of balance expanded beyond the personal and political. She began to see it as a cosmic principle, reflected in the rhythms of OO itself, the interplay of fire and water, light and shadow, chaos and order. Her role was not simply to wield power, but to harmonize it with the forces around her, creating a sense of stability and continuity in a world that is ever-shifting and unpredictable. As Flame Princess continued to evolve, she began to grasp the deeper subtleties of her existence and her power. Leadership was no longer simply about commanding the Fire Kingdom or asserting authority over subjects. It became a meditation on presence, intention, and the way one's actions ripple through the lives of others. She understood that balance was not a fixed state, but a practice, one that required constant attention, reflection, and adjustment. Each decision, no matter how small, contributed to the ongoing harmonization of her inner and outer world. The quietest lessons often proved the most profound. Flame Princess found insight in the stillness of her own thoughts, the gentle moments when she observed her flames flickering in reflection, or when she walked through her kingdom at dusk, watching the molten rivers glow softly in the waning light. In these solitary times, she contemplated her responsibilities, her emotions, and her own impulses. She began to see that true strength emerges not only from force or fire, but from awareness, patience, and the ability to act with foresight. Relationships remained essential in shaping her understanding of balance. Even past connections, like her relationship with Finn, continued to teach her subtle truths. Their time together had illuminated the interplay between desire and restraint, intimacy and autonomy. These lessons now guided her interactions as a ruler, reminding her that empathy, trust, and careful consideration are as crucial as power in nurturing healthy connections. She also learned that boundaries, both hers and those of others, are not obstacles, but frameworks within which mutual respect and growth can flourish. As she matured, Flame Princess faced challenges that tested not only her judgment, but her emotional equilibrium. Conflicts within her kingdom, tensions with neighboring realms, and magical anomalies in Wu provided constant opportunities to practice her evolving philosophy of leadership. Yet even in moments of difficulty, she approached situations with a newfound calm, recognizing that her responses were more powerful than her impulses. By tempering her instincts with reflection, she transformed challenges into opportunities for learning, growth, and the reinforcement of her authority. The evolution of her power became increasingly apparent. Flame Princess's flames, once chaotic and reactive, now responded to intention and focus. She discovered that her fire could nurture, illuminate, and guide as effectively as it could destroy. Each flare of heat became a choice, each burst of light a reflection of her self-awareness. Her mastery over fire mirrored her mastery over herself, revealing the intimate connection between identity and power. She had become a ruler who could wield her abilities not as a threat, but as an instrument of balance and creation. In this stage of her journey, Flame Princess also began to appreciate the subtleties of influence. Leadership was no longer about domination, but about inspiration. She discovered that the respect and loyalty of her people were earned through consistency, fairness, and empathy. By modeling restraint and deliberate action, she cultivated trust and admiration, demonstrating that authority rooted in understanding is far more enduring than power imposed through fear or coercion. Her internal growth was mirrored by the external evolution of the Fire Kingdom. What had once been a landscape dominated by raw heat and volatility became a realm where life and fire coexisted. Rivers of molten lava illuminated the paths for citizens. Mountains glowed warmly in the night, and the very environment reflected her control and care. In harmonizing her power with the needs of her kingdom, Flame Princess created a space where strength and warmth could coexist, demonstrating that leadership, guided by insight, can transform even the most volatile of elements into a source of stability and inspiration. Another key aspect of her development was learning to accept imperfection, both in herself and in the world around her. Flame Princess understood that balance does not imply flawlessness, but rather an awareness of the interplay between effort, intention, and outcome. Mistakes became opportunities for insight, and not sources of shame. Emotional flare-ups, misjudgment, and unforeseen consequences were met with reflection and adaptation, allowing her to refine her approach while maintaining compassion for herself and others. In quiet, reflective moments, she explored the deeper meaning of her power. Flame was no longer merely an extension of her emotion. It had become a lens through which she understood herself and her place in Wu. She recognized that her ability to create, illuminate, and protect was intertwined with the responsibility to act thoughtfully, ethically, and with awareness. Power, she realized, is not simply something one possesses. It is something one practices, owns, and aligns with the broader currents of life. As Flame Princess approached the culmination of this period in her life, she began to feel a profound sense of coherence between her inner world and her outward action. The chaos that had once defined her existence, both emotionally and within the Fire Kingdom, gradually gave way to a rhythm of intentionality and insight. She understood that growth is not a sudden revelation, but a continuous process of learning, adjusting, and aligning oneself with both personal values and the needs of those around you. Her flame, once a reflection of volatility, now shone with clarity and purpose, illuminating the path she had chosen and inspiring those who followed her. This newfound harmony did not mean the absence of challenge. Flame Princess still faced moments of doubt external threats, and the lingering echoes of past fear. Yet rather than being consumed by them, she approached each situation with patience and reflection. She realized that the measure of true power lies not in the absence of difficulty, but in the ability to navigate it with composure, wisdom, and empathy. Each challenge became a mirror, revealing not only areas for improvement, but also the strength she had cultivated through years of experience and introspection. Her relationships continued to guide and shape her understanding of balance. Connections with her citizens, allies, and even former friends became intricate threads weaving through the tapestry of her leadership. Each interaction offered lessons in communication, empathy, and mutual respect. Flame Princess learned to value dialogue over assertion, listening over reacting, and understanding over judgment. These principles not only strengthened her bonds with others, but also deepened her awareness of herself, revealing how her emotions and intentions intertwined with the world around her. A particularly meaningful aspect of this stage was her ability to integrate lessons from her past, including those learned from her time with Finn. She reflected on their shared experiences, the joy, the mistakes, the heartbreak, and recognized how they had prepared her for the responsibilities of leadership. Emotional maturity became inseparable from her political growth. She saw that the skills of empathy, patience, and self-reflection, honed in personal relationships, were equally vital in guiding a kingdom, mediating conflicts, and inspiring loyalty. Flame Princess also developed a nuanced understanding of her own power and its impact. She recognized that strength is not merely the capacity to act, but the wisdom to choose when, how, and why to act. Fire, once an unpredictable manifestation of her feelings, became a language through which she communicated intention, protection, and guidance. A controlled flare could signal warmth and safety, while a deliberate display of heat could convey authority and resolve. Her mastery over her flames became a metaphor for her mastery over herself, demonstrating that personal power and self-awareness are inseparable. In addition to her personal and political growth, Flame Princess explored the philosophical dimensions of balance. She observed the natural rhythms of the interplay of fire and water, light and shadow, chaos, and drew lessons for herself. Harmony, she realized, is not about stasis or perfection, but about responsive adaptation. It is the ongoing practice of aligning one's actions, emotions, and intentions with the ebb and flow of the surrounding world. This understanding enriched her perspective as a ruler and as an individual, allowing her to navigate complexity with grace and insight. Her reign increasingly reflected these insights. The Fire Kingdom flourished under her care, becoming a realm where strength and warmth coexisted. Citizens felt protected yet empowered, inspired rather than intimidated. The land itself seemed to mirror her growth, with rivers of lava glowing steadily, mountains radiating controlled warmth, and flames illuminating paths rather than consuming them. This harmony was not achieved through force alone, but through thoughtful guidance, patience, and the ongoing refinement of her own character. As she continued to mature, Flame Princess embraced the dynamic nature of balance. She understood that growth is cyclical, that moments of instability and challenge are natural and necessary. Rather than fearing these fluctuations, she learned to navigate them with intentionality, using each experience to deepen her understanding of herself and her world. This awareness allowed her to act decisively while maintaining flexibility, to lead with confidence while remaining open to learning, and to wield her power with both courage and compassion. In these years of reflection and practice, Flame Princess achieved a subtle but profound transformation. Her identity became fully her own, shaped not by the shadows of her past, nor by the expectations of others, but by the deliberate cultivation of self-awareness, empathy, and mastery. She came to see her flames not merely as instruments of power, but as extensions of her evolving self, expressions of insight, intention, and care. By the close of this chapter, Flame Princess had discovered a rhythm of life and leadership that embodied harmony, resilience, and purpose. She had learned to balance the intensity of her nature with the demands of governance, the passions of her heart with the needs of her kingdom, and the lessons of her past with the possibilities of her future. Her journey in this stage is a quiet testament to the enduring process of growth, the courage required to change, and the gentle strength that arises from seeking balance in a world that is endlessly complex and beautiful. This period of growth, change, and balance set the stage for the next chapter in her story, a chapter in which she would continue to explore the depths of her identity, confront new challenges, and shape her place in the ever-evolving world of Ooh. Tonight, as we drift deeper into the story of Flame Princess, we arrive at a chapter that is less about events and more about essence, her symbolism, her legacy, and the enduring ideas she embodies. Flame Princess is not only a character of fire and power. She is a reflection of growth, transformation, and the delicate balance between passion and wisdom. In this segment, we will explore what her journey represents, the subtle layers of meaning woven into her story, and the ways her legacy continues to ripple through the world of Ooh. From the very beginning, Flame Princess has carried a duality at her core. She is both destructive and nurturing, volatile yet capable of profound care, a figure of intensity and warmth. This duality mirrors the nature of fire itself, dangerous if uncontrolled, yet life-giving and illuminating when guided by purpose. Her flames are more than an elemental trait. They are a visual metaphor for emotional honesty, the power of self-expression, and the potential for transformation. In every flare, every controlled blaze, she reveals something essential of herself and the choices she has made along her journey. Her legacy is rooted not only in her deeds as a ruler, but in the way she embodies the possibilities of self-discovery. Flame Princess demonstrates that identity is not static, that we are constantly reshaped by experience, reflection, and intention. Her growth from a hidden, isolated child into a confident, self-aware leader mirrors the broader theme of metamorphosis that runs through Adventure Time. She teaches that power is not merely a tool or a weapon, but an extension of self-understanding and ethical engagement with the world. One of the most enduring aspects of her story is the way she balances intensity with restraint. Flame Princess's journey illustrates the idea that true strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the mastery. Her ability to temper her emotions, to channel her passions constructively, and to wield her power thoughtfully provides a quiet but profound lesson in self-mastery. She becomes a symbol of the delicate equilibrium between what we feel and what we choose to express, reminding us that fire, like emotion, can illuminate or consume depending on how it is directed. Her relationships also contribute to her symbolism. Through interactions with Finn, Princess Bubblegum, and the citizens of the Fire Kingdom, she demonstrates that connection and empathy are integral to power. Leadership is shown not as domination, but as a dialogue, a constant negotiation between self and other. The lessons she carries from love, heartbreak, trust, and reconciliation extend beyond the personal into the political, emphasizing that wisdom arises from experience, reflection, and the careful consideration of others' perspective. In this sense, Flame Princess embodies the notion that personal growth and leadership are inseparable, each informing and enhancing the other. There is also a broader cosmic resonance in her character. Flame Princess represents the untamed, elemental forces of the universe brought into harmony with consciousness and intention. She embodies transformation, the cycle of creation and destruction, and the interplay between chaos and order. In Adventure Time, a world where magic, apocalypse, and the surreal intersect, she stands as a figure who bridges instinct and reason, emotion and responsibility, passion and wisdom. Her flames are not only literal, they are symbolic of the spark within all being, the inner fire that drives growth, courage, and change. Her story invites viewers to reflect on the nature of power itself. Flame Princess teaches that authority is not solely about control, but about understanding, intention, and responsibility. Her journey shows that influence is most enduring when exercised with care. The legacy is built not by domination, but by the cultivation of trust, empathy, and balance. She demonstrates that strength is enriched by self-awareness, and that the act of guiding others is inseparable from the act of mastering. Even in the quieter moments of her story, when she walks alone through the glowing landscapes of the Fire Kingdom, there is a sense of continuity, a silent echo of her evolving wisdom. These scenes suggest that true legacy is not defined by dramatic feats or battles, but by the steady, deliberate cultivation of character, integrity, and intention. Flame Princess embodies this legacy through her very presence, her careful mastery of fire, and the thoughtful way she navigates the responsibilities and relationships of her world. Flame Princess's symbolism extends beyond her personal journey and political role. It reaches into the emotional and philosophical fabric of itself. She embodies the process of transformation, illustrating that growth is rarely linear and that understanding oneself is an ongoing journey. Her flames are a reminder that our inner intensity, if guided with intention, can illuminate the world around us rather than leaving destruction in its wake. In this way, she reflects a universal truth. The power we hold is most meaningful when tempered with self-awareness and care. Her presence in also highlights the interplay between individual identity and communal responsibility. Flame Princess's development shows that personal growth and social contribution are intertwined. As she learns to balance her desires, emotions, and instincts, she simultaneously shapes the well-being of her kingdom and those around her. Her story suggests that leadership, influence, and impact are not about asserting dominance, but about harmonizing personal strength with the needs and rhythms of the community. This theme resonates quietly throughout her narrative, reinforcing the idea that true legacy is measured not by conquest or fame, but by the positive and thoughtful influence we leave behind. Philosophically, Flame Princess serves as a meditation on control and freedom. Her early life, confined and manipulated by her father, contrasts sharply with the autonomy she later achieved. Through her story, Adventure Time explores the tension between external control and internal mastery, showing how freedom is attained not merely by escaping constraints, but by learning to wield one's own power responsibly. Flame Princess's flames, once chaotic and dangerous, become a metaphor for this journey. The wildfire tamed not by suppression, but by understanding, self-discipline, and awareness. Emotionally, she resonates with the universal struggle of reconciling desire, passion, and responsibility. Her romantic experiences, particularly with Finn, reveal the complexities of connection, intimacy, and vulnerability. These relationships teach her lessons about patience, trust, and the careful management of emotional intensity. In doing so, they reinforce the broader thematic message that personal growth is inseparable from our interactions with others, and that love and connection are as much about empathy and reflection as they are about passion and excitement. Culturally within Flame Princess represents a bridge between the elemental forces of the Fire Kingdom and the broader dynamics of the land. She is a living embodiment of her realm's identity, reflecting its intensity, vitality, and potential for transformation. At the same time, she engages meaningfully with other kingdoms and adventurers, demonstrating that even the most powerful and elemental forces must negotiate, collaborate, and adapt in order to thrive. Her story suggests that balance is not a solitary pursuit, but a relational one, dependent on understanding, negotiation, and the harmonization of diverse energies. Her legacy also speaks to the subtle yet profound nature of influence. Flame Princess teaches that even seemingly small choices, the way we temper our emotions, the care with which we wield power, the intention behind our actions, can have enduring consequences. Her rule and personal growth highlight the quiet power of consistency, reflection, and mindful action. These lessons ripple outward, affecting not only her kingdom, but the broader world, reminding viewers that the true measure of influence lies in the ongoing cultivation of wisdom, compassion, and self-mastery. In many ways, she is a figure of hope and possibility. Her story illustrates that the challenges of identity, emotion, and responsibility can be met with courage, reflection, and intentionality. She demonstrates that the intensity of one's nature need not be a burden, but can become a source of guidance, warmth, and illumination. Flame Princess embodies the idea that growth is a lifelong process, that mastery is a practice rather than a destination, and that our actions, small or grand, can create enduring change when guided by awareness and purpose. Flame Princess's story also resonates as a symbol of resilience. From her earliest days in the cage of the Fire Kingdom, she faced confinement, manipulation, and the lingering shadow of fear. Yet through patience, reflection, and courage, she transformed these trials into opportunities for growth and self-understanding. Her flames, once emblematic of danger and unpredictability, evolved into a controlled, purposeful manifestation of her inner strength. In this way, she embodies the idea that adversity, when met with awareness and perseverance, can forge not only resilience, but wisdom and clarity. Her presence in Wu serves as a quiet reminder that true leadership is inseparable from emotional intelligence. Flame Princess's development illustrates that authority is most effective when combined with empathy, mindfulness, and self-reflection. She balances her own passions with the needs of her kingdom, responding to challenges not with impulsive reaction, but with thoughtful engagement. This harmony between self and duty underscores the nuanced way Adventure Time explores power, responsibility, and the ongoing journey toward personal mastery. Symbolically, Flame Princess represents the transformative potential inherent in every being. Fire, by nature, is both destructive and generative, and her mastery of it mirrors the journey toward self-mastery and ethical action. She demonstrates that intense energy, when guided by intention and understanding, can illuminate the world rather than consume it. Her flames are not just a source of power, they are a language of growth, a manifestation of self-awareness, and a symbol of the deliberate, mindful expression of one's nature. Her influence extends beyond the Fire Kingdom. Through interactions with other kingdoms, adventurers, and the broader landscape of Wu, Flame Princess illustrates how one's growth and ethical approach to power can ripple outward. She models a leadership that values dialogue, negotiation, and compassion alongside strength. In doing so, she contributes to a broader vision of harmony, showing that influence rooted in care and awareness is more enduring than that based on fear or intimidation. The philosophical undertones of her story are subtle yet profound. Flame Princess invites viewers to consider the delicate balance between freedom and responsibility, passion and control, intensity and mindfulness. Her journey is a meditation on the ways in which personal power can be cultivated responsibly, and how self-understanding is inseparable from the ethical application of strength. In a world as unpredictable and complex as O, she becomes a guide, demonstrating that mastery is not about domination, but about alignment, reflection, and intentional action. Emotionally, she remains a figure of depth and nuance. Her past heartbreak, particularly her experiences with Finn, continues to inform her understanding of connection, trust, and vulnerability. These experiences teach her that growth often comes through reflection, reconciliation, and the careful negotiation of desires and responsibilities. She embodies the subtle wisdom that emotional intensity, when harnessed thoughtfully, can become a force for insight, empathy, and constructive action. Culturally, Flame Princess is a bridge between elemental power and conscious choice. She embodies the spirit of the Fire Kingdom, yet she engages meaningfully with the broader community of Wu, showing that true leadership requires both self-possession and relational awareness. Her journey reflects the larger themes of Adventure Time, the interplay between chaos and order, instinct and reason, destruction and creation. In this sense, she stands as both a character within the story and a symbolic touchstone, reflecting broader truths about growth, balance, and the responsible use of power. Her legacy is quiet, yet enduring. The warmth of her flames, the care with which she governs, and the clarity she has cultivated in both emotion and action leave an imprint not only on her kingdom, but on the narrative world of Wu itself. She demonstrates that influence and legacy are not measured solely by feats or accomplishments, but by the quality of presence, the intentionality of action, and the cultivation of balance. Flame Princess teaches that the most profound power is often subtle, rooted in awareness, empathy, and the deliberate shaping of one's character. Through all these dimensions, emotional, philosophical, cultural, and symbolic, Flame Princess emerges as a figure of depth and resonance. She embodies the potential for transformation, the value of reflection, and the enduring importance of intentional action. Her story invites viewers to consider the ways in which we navigate our own passion, responsibilities, and relationships, and to recognize that mastery, whether of fire, emotion, or life itself, is a continual, mindful practice. As Flame Princess's story unfolds into its final reflection, we see that her legacy is woven not only through her action, but through the very essence of who she has become. She represents the alchemy of growth, the transformation of raw, untamed energy into purpose, clarity, and warmth. Her journey reminds us that identity is not a fixed state, but an ongoing process of understanding, refinement, and conscious choice. Each flame she wields is a reflection of her self-awareness, a quiet symbol of the harmony she has cultivated between passion and responsibility. Her presence in Ooh continues to resonate as a testament to resilience. Even when faced with challenges, emotional upheaval, or the weight of expectation, Flame Princess demonstrates that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the mastery of it. She embodies the subtle courage required to navigate the complexities of life and leadership, teaching that true power grows not from domination or fear, but from reflection, patience, and integrity. Her flames, once feared as destructive, now shine as beacons of insight, care, and controlled intensity, offering a quiet illumination to those who observe her journey. Flame Princess also stands as a symbol of relational wisdom. Her experiences, romantic, familial, and political, illustrate the delicate interplay between selfhood and connection. She has learned to balance her own desire with the needs of others, to temper emotion with reason, and to approach relationships with empathy, honesty, and intentionality. In doing so, she embodies a philosophy that extends beyond her personal story. The meaningful influence and leadership arise from understanding and valuing the perspectives of those around us, and that emotional intelligence is as critical to legacy as any display of power. Her narrative invites reflection on the philosophical dimension of control and freedom. Flame Princess's early life and confinement contrast sharply with the autonomy she gradually achieved, highlighting the profound distinction between being controlled by circumstance and mastering one's own power. Through this lens, her flames serve as a metaphor, not just for strength, but for conscious action. The ability to channel energy in a way that is both self-aware and considerate of the wider world. Her evolution demonstrates that true liberation involves both understanding and responsibility, and that mastery of self is inseparable from ethical engagement with others. Culturally, she bridges worlds. Flame Princess carries the essence of the Fire Kingdom, yet she engages with the broader tapestry of Ooh in ways that extend her influence and exemplify the value of cooperation and mutual respect. She negotiates with other kingdoms, interacts with adventurers, and navigates complex social dynamics with a growing sense of poise and insight. In these interactions, her story reflects a subtle but profound message: that leadership and influence are not solitary pursuits, but communal practice, and that the most enduring legacy arises from balance, wisdom, and the integration of personal power with the needs of others. Her symbolism also extends to the viewer, offering lessons that linger quietly long after the screen dims. Flame Princess encourages reflection on our own intensity, passions, and growth. She reminds us that the challenges we face, emotional, relational, or situational, can be transformed into opportunities for insight and mastery. Her flames are a mirror, inviting us to consider how we might channel our own energies with intention, how we might temper our impulses while honoring our true selves, and how we might cultivate harmony within the complex worlds we inhabit. In many ways, Flame Princess embodies the enduring themes of Adventure Time itself, the interplay between chaos and order, instinct and reflection, destruction and creation. She demonstrates that power and vulnerability are not opposite, but complementary forces, that passion and discipline can coexist, and that growth, though often challenging, is ultimately a source of illumination and purpose. Her story is one of transformation, balance, and mindful engagement, leaving a quiet yet profound imprint on Wu and the hearts of those who follow her journey. As this chapter closes, we are left with a vision of Flame Princess, not only as a ruler, a warrior, or a friend, but as a symbol of what it means to grow, to learn, and to harmonize one's inner fire with the responsibilities and connections of the world. Her flames continue to burn, steady and alive, reflecting the care, wisdom, and balance she has cultivated over time. They remind us that legacy is less about the magnitude of our actions than the awareness and intention behind them, that mastery is a continuous practice, and that the truest strength lies in the ability to illuminate without consuming, to warm without overwhelming, and to exist fully in harmony with both self and world. And so as we lay down our heads tonight, let us carry the quiet lesson of Flame Princess with us, that our own inner fires, when guided with care and intention, can light the way through darkness, foster growth, and leave a lasting warmth in the hearts of those around us. Good night.